Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Call them the Sergeant Schultz media. You remember the character on Hogan's Heroes? I see nothing. I hear nothing. I know nothing. Forget about what you see. Forget about what's happening in your very life, your own experience, your own impression of the rising criminal problem in Washington, D.C. over the last 5, 7, 10 years. No, the media will tell you that everything's fine. There's no problem here. It's a safe, clean, wonderful city.
Yeah, look away.
Well, not here. We've been talking about this story for quite some time because we can see what's going on. We delve into reality here instead of the gaslighting propaganda media. Coming up in 30 minutes, Elissa DeSouza. She's a D.C. resident turned activist because of what happened to the once lovely Navy Yard neighborhood. You remember they cleaned it up in time to get that baseball stadium built and everything was fine, and then they let it go to hell. So how did we get here, Julie Gunlock? Let's bring in a friend of the show. We've had her on quite a bit over the last 5 to 7 years as this has gotten worse and worse and worse. She's an attorney. She's a former D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner. She's also, by the way, a Democrat who, votes Democrat. This is her party, and she's been imploring the district council and mayor to do something. Denise Rucker Krepp, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me today. Yep, I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, of course. We love Democrats. Mostly. How did we get here, in your opinion? What happened here at the district council?
Well, we got here because of laws written about 10 years ago by Charles Allen and the others that said to the D.C. juveniles, we're not going to hold you accountable. We're not going to consider you an adult until you turn 24. And, hey, if you commit violent crime, it's okay. We're going to look the other way. That's what happened.
Can you, first of all, did you welcome President Trump's announcement yesterday and the moves that he's making to try to draw attention to this and maybe fix the problem?
I appreciate the president saying the D.C. has a crime problem, and we do. Really, what I would love to see is all of these juveniles be held accountable. So I would love to hear the president say, we're going to devote more prosecutors to these crimes, and we're going to actually prosecute. That's what's going on here. Is we've had D.C. laws that say to the kids, again, we're not going to hold you accountable. We need prosecutors to prosecute the crimes. That's really what we need.
Denise, this is scary, though, because it's not just a matter of out of control kids. Perhaps there isn't strong parental involvement. This has gotten to the point where gangs are now, they know about the laws. They understand that these kids are not going to be prosecuted. So they are recruiting these kids who are carrying out some of this gang violence. That's really scary because, again, that's harder to solve. What actions do you think? I mean, have you heard the Trump administration? I know that I heard a lot of what they said yesterday, but on the gang violence, how do you tackle that exactly? I mean, maybe prosecutions are the way to go, but I think these gangs are pretty wise to how difficult actually improving the situation is going to be.
Actually, it's not that difficult. It's called prosecution.
Yeah.
So if you listen to Cully Stimson's article, he's been talking about the numbers, and it's the numbers that I saw 10 years ago, which said we have a lot of crime. It's not being prosecuted. It's a lack of accountability. It's a lack of expectation. And I can't even get to gangs when I've got girls who are beating up on each other on my street. And when their parents call and say, hey, we'd like to have these kids prosecuted, the police officer looks at the parent and says, we can't do anything because of laws that Charles Allen wrote. So it's a single kid that's being beaten up in the face. And when dad says, I need more, and the police are saying we can't do anything, then you get to gangs that are roving around the city and stealing clothes. I mean, heck, we have a curfew at the Navy Yard right now because of the juveniles. And then we have judges who aren't prosecuting. Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, for putting a spotlight on the fact that D.C. has crime. Now let's do something about it.
Yeah, and I do think U.S. Attorney Pirro mentioned that about the prosecutors, and she's hoping to get a robust prosecution culture going here. But isn't part of the problem the sort of handshake that happens between the Justice Department and the local Attorney General?
Oh, absolutely. He's not prosecuting. He's looking the other way. I mean, we need prosecutions, and we need juveniles to be held accountable for their acts. I mean, stealing a car with a gun is not a juvenile crime. It is an adult crime. Yeah. Raping somebody is an adult crime. Yeah. Murder is an adult crime. And when we tell a 15-year-old, if you murder somebody, you only have to stay in jail until you turn 18, and then we let them out. And then, shocker of shockers, they murder somebody else. Yeah. We're not setting expectations.
We're speaking, and we're happy to speak with her, too, Denise Rucker Krepp, who is a D.C. attorney and a former D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner who's been sounding the alarm on these issues for quite some time. She's a frequent guest here when crime gets bad, and it has gotten bad. Let's face it, you and I, we've had these conversations for several years now. What did you make of a lot of the media reaction yesterday as they sort of pretended, well, he's really just going to an extreme here. It's really not that bad in D.C. It's a safe city. What did you make of that?
Yeah.
I got angry, to be very honest with you. When I have stabbings, shootings, robberies, carjackings, and everything else happening in front of just my house on Capitol Hill, and I have everybody saying in the media, it's okay, it's all right, everything's fine. What world do you live in? Do you live in a super special block? Because I don't. I'm telling my kids to hit the ground when I've got gunshots. So if you want to stay in your super special world, you do it. But as long as we have violent carjackings committed by 15-year-olds, then I'm going to say, hey, let's start prosecuting. Let's start changing the soft on crime laws written by the D.C. Council, and let's start holding people accountable.
What's also kind of just shocking is these protesters who have shown up. I'm not quite sure what their point is. Are they? I mean, it's sort of it's similar to this no kings idea of this being tyranny that Trump is taking over the city. What message do you have for those protesters who, by the way, probably live in Arlington?
I would just ask them, do you know of anybody who's been murdered? I do. Do you know anybody who's been raped? I do. Do you know anybody who's been carjacked? I do. And what do you think should be happening? Now, if you're telling me that that people should not do anything, then please go live in another state. But it's happening here in D.C., and it's time we start holding violent criminals accountable for their acts.
Ms. Krepp, you've been sort of in the weeds on this, if you don't mind, and I mean that in a good way. I've read your columns. Yeah. I know that you know these laws. You know the players involved and what happened. Two questions, first of all. What could help things politically? I'll start here in terms of the political machinations at the district council, because it's one-party rule. And generally speaking, when you win your seat, you're in. You don't get challenged again unless you're in the middle of a scandal. And as we saw with Javon White, even if you do get into a scandal and you're under FBI investigation, you still win your seat back. So is there anything that we could do to hold our elected officials accountable? Because they seem like they can do whatever they want, no matter how bad the city gets.
Yeah, I think the only way to do it is at the election box, and it's telling folks to run against everybody, Charles Allen, who's written all these laws. I mean, I would love to see a candidate to represent Ward 6, because that is where Capitol Hill is, that says, I'm not going to tolerate this. So, yeah, you're going to have people run against Charles. You're going to have people run against Phil Mendelssohn, because he's enabled a lot of this as chair of the D.C. Council. But it's every single
But you know how the party structure is. I mean, the party politics in D.C., it's just stifling. Honestly, it's like a miracle if somebody were to challenge and win one of these entrenched candidates.
Well, you know what? Everybody has a vote, and everybody has to have a voice and use it, because we can't blame somebody else when a carjacking happens in front of your street. Yeah. You have to own responsibility.
If I may, because we keep hearing these numbers, 30-year low for violent crime, and crime is down, and reported crime is down, which is a very interesting way to phrase it. The whole scenario that you painted, where the police say, listen, I mean, sorry about the carjacking, sorry about this, armed robbery, there's not a whole lot we can do because it's a juvenile and they'll get free. Is that why a lot of these numbers are underreported, because juvenile crime is being treated differently?
It's underreported because people aren't reporting. So let's go there first. So people
they just
saying,
shrug.
Hey,
they're like, it's DC.
Yes. Yes. So they're shrugging. Or in the case where I saw the girl committing assault on another girl, and the parent says, I want to press charges, and the police says, I can't do anything. That's what's happening. So it's
right.
Underreported. People are shrugging. DC cops are saying we can't do anything, and then the DC council council members are saying it's okay, just keep on going. We don't expect you to behave yourselves. That's what's happening.
All right. Well, Denise Rucker Krepp, I know that you're going to keep up the charge. You're going to do what you can, and hopefully we will get a change in leadership and a change in representation here in D.C. They deserve it. Otherwise, it's just going to go from bad to worse, sadly. I really do appreciate you joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
It is 7:16.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right. Coming up, I want to remind you, we're going to be speaking with Elissa DeSouza. She's a D.C. resident down at Navy Yard to give us her specific examples of what's going on in her neighborhood and how crime has gotten worse there. It's amazing that we have to spend so much time, Julie, sort of telling the truth about crime in Washington, D.C., as the Washington Post and the major networks spent the last 24 hours trying to convince everyone here that it's the safest city on the planet.
Yeah, I do really love to listen to wealthy, privileged journalists, probably with drivers, living in luxury apartments with doormen and things like that. Theorize on DC crime when they many of them don't see it, or if they do, they deny it's happening.
Well, here's one example. Ron Campillas. He's a retired D.C. bureau chief for the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, which I've never heard of before. But just pause for a minute. He's retired, so that means he hasn't been, engaged in working in D.C. and traveling on Metro and doing his job or whatever it is he did. So he's already retired, but he took to X and said, I live in Arlington. All right, so now right there.
There you go.
I mean, Arlington ain't great, but it's a lot better than,
Oh, there are areas of Arlington. I mean, honestly. There are pockets of Alexandria that just are very safe. Yes.
I live in Arlington. I'm a reporter. I travel to D.C. frequently, which means he gets on the Orange Line and gets off and walks 2 blocks.
That's how my 7-year-old would write an essay. I am in Arlington.
Right.
I am.
By the way, so I live in Arlington. I'm a reporter. I travel to D.C. frequently. I've never been carjacked. I know what happens, but I don't know anyone who's been carjacked. I've never been the victim of any crime in D.C. I've been to cities crawling with troops. That's ugly. So his problem is that we're going to have National Guard supporting the police officers here.
Yeah, first of all, how much you want to bet Ron doesn't own a car? 2, anecdotes do not equal evidence. Ron, this is something that most journalists know. Just because you haven't personally experienced doesn't mean it's not happening.
This is Peter Baker, New York Times. He says, citing a non-existent crime crisis, Trump plans to take over the Washington, D.C. police and put troops in the streets of the nation's capital. The D.C. Police Union chairman at the same time yesterday, quoted by Mark Hemingway in response to Mr. Baker, we completely agree with the president that crime in D.C. is out of control and something needs to be done with it. So are you going to believe a New York Times columnist saying there's a non-existent crime crisis or the president of the D.C. Police Union?
I don't know. If I were a reporter, I might talk to the president of the D.C. Police Force Union. That might be a good source. Apparently, Peter didn't have time to talk to him.
In July 25, a 21-year-old congressional intern for a Republican of Kansas was killed, getting caught in a targeted gunfire. In August of 2025, Elias Rodriguez was indicted on federal hate crime charges for the murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers. In February of 24, Michael Gill, a 56-year-old father of 3, was fatally shot during an 11-hour crime spree across D.C. and Maryland. In March of 23, Philip Todd, an aide to Senator Rand Paul, was stabbed 4 times. June of 24, Leslie Marie Gaines died after a carjacker stole her SUV at MedStar Washington Hospital Center. March of 21, Mohammed Anwar, 66-year-old Uber Eats driver, was killed in a carjacking by teenage girls. By the way, those teenage girls were given, I think, a really nasty slap on the wrist for that murder, and on and on. And may I remind you that on the day that the Congress was voting on a crime bill in 23, a Democrat lawmaker, a congresswoman from Minnesota, was assaulted with a knife-wielding maniac in her apartment building as she was headed to the Capitol for the vote. Stop with the gaslighting, for God's sake. It's outrageous.
It is outrageous. And this doesn't, what that list, I remember nearly every single one of those incidents, Larry, because we report on them.
That's right.
And it's so heartbreaking. I mean, a 21-year-old congressional intern here to learn about government and probably, trying to enjoy the city. And I think about his poor parents having to deal with that tragic loss. Where are people's sense of basic kindness to the victims? And for all of these deaths and horrible crimes, there are, probably millions of incidents of things like being intimidated, like what our Amber Duke described in her tweet of being harassed, of being threatened with rape.
Right, that doesn't make it to the crime statistics.
That doesn't make it,
That's
but
right.
there are millions of incidents in this city and the surrounding areas because of the lawlessness.
Yeah. And thank you to our great executive producer, Heather Hunter, for that thumbnail list. She makes us look good. That
Yes.
wasn't me off the top of my head. She wrote that up and chronicled it for us. She's fantastic. It's 7:23.
Coming up, we're going to talk to Elissa DeSouza. She is a D.C. resident, and she's outspoken about D.C. crime. Keep it here. It's 7:30.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Yes, sir, you betcha. It's 7:37 on O'Connor and Company, and it's a busy Tuesday morning as the eyes of the world really are on the nation's capital for all the wrong reasons. President Trump pointing out the untenable crime situation here, lawlessness, lack of prosecutions, understaffed police department. He made an announcement yesterday saying that we would utilize federal law enforcement to shore up the efforts here and try to prosecute in a robust fashion. And we're analyzing that all morning long because you're getting a lot of misinformation from the media, other media outlets who claim that this is all sort of, trumped up, if I may use that term, that this is a non-existent crime crisis in D.C., which just defies not only our lived experience, but also reality. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
And we're joined by Elissa DeSouza, who's been an outspoken activist with regard to crime in her neighborhood, Navy Yard. And Elissa, it must have been sort of Alice through the looking glass yesterday as you saw people sitting at the ABC News anchor desk saying, well, actually, there's no crime problem in D.C. What do you make of that?
I think that people that say that their crime is down or there's no crime in D.C., they're really not even living in the city, or at least not in areas that are crime, which I don't know where that even exists.
Well, and Navy Yard in particular has sort of been the hotbed of all the worst trends in the last 5 years. And I mean the carjacking crisis, but also juvenile crime. And you've been sort of cataloging it through social media and through your public pronouncements as you witness it firsthand, right?
Yeah, it's hard not to see just looking out the window. You see fireworks every time around and dirt bikes and people violating these curfews. They don't care what time it is. If it's made at 8 o'clock, they're starting earlier and out and about.
The Navy Yard was built up as this great place for nightlife. It sort of went through this renewal process, and they did a lot of building around there. And it's really a very cool area to hang out. But are you worried from a real estate perspective? I mean, I know you're a resident of that area. I don't know if you own, but I mean, I've talked to a real estate agent, a friend of mine, who says, there's real fears about that area and in DC in general as people are fleeing DC. So I don't know if if you or if you've talked to your neighbors, is there worry about that area from an investment standpoint?
Yeah, my dad's a real estate agent. I am an owner here, so I have a condo here, and it's a big worry. I've even had friends in apartment complexes that have moved out of the area because of crime, and just even trying to rent out a place or rent out my own place here, people are worried about the crime. Even, it's already a high trafficking area because you got the ballpark, and a lot of presence of people walking around and a lot of cops that they see, and they don't know what's going on.
By the way, lost in all of the sort of gaslighting that we've seen over the last 24 hours since the president's announcement is the fact that the mayor's own police chief Sunday morning declared an expanded juvenile curfew zone that sort of envelops the entire Navy Yard neighborhood.
Yeah,
that
why would
started
that be?
on August 10th, the day before the president made his announcement. So to pretend like this isn't happening, has that made a difference, by the way, this juvenile curfew zone?
It actually started in July when things were going on, is when they, started enforcing it a little bit here and there with posting signs and making it that this was going to come across the board. And it really hasn't helped much because we just see kids out there earlier, and then come this 8 o'clock time, they're not so much maybe being pushed out of the area, just pushed into smaller gatherings in other different spots, whether it's Navy Yard or on Capitol Hill. They're just moving them along, and there's just no action or accountability of what to do with these kids.
We've heard from many experts, including the chairman of the D.C. Police Union, as well as law enforcement officials who used to work in D.C. and no longer. They have other jurisdictions. They've often said that this much of the problem is a manpower problem, that they cannot get cops in D.C. Recruitment is down. Hiring levels are down, much of it because of the laws that have been passed that undermine a police department's authorities and their rules of engagement. In light of that, President Trump's announcement that there will be federal reinforcements to be able to shore up the manpower issue, that in and of itself, do you think that will make a difference? Do you welcome that move?
I've seen federal officers just in the last week walking the streets, and I think it's great. I think it's great to have this police presence because people like to see enforcement and engage with them rather than sitting in patrol cars where you get to talk to them face to face. And that's what law enforcement and federal officers have been doing lately, walking the streets. And it does deter crime from happening. But if, it's not a quick fix. There has to be consistent enforcement. There has to be accountability, and there has to be some follow through after, if you arrest these people, what's going to happen then. And with law enforcement and not having enough, boots on the ground, we're burning out quickly. You have these officers that are working overtime, and they're just tired. I mean, this overtime night after day after patrolling the streets during the day, it's just too much sometimes.
What is your prediction, 5 years from now? Do you think things will have improved? This is, 4 years of a Trump administration and potentially, an extension of that through Vance or Marco Rubio. But where do you see this in 5 years? Do you think that things will improve?
I think it's better now with, saying that these implementations and putting out the National Guard. I think it'll make it a safer place. Everyone wants to have it safer to live, and everyone wants, I think, a consensus to visit and make it a safer neighborhood and, a better city. So I think long term, but, it's too early to tell now, and time will tell if it's just a solution or just a Band-Aid.
Right. Elissa DeSouza, how can people follow you on social media? Because I know that you give some good advice, some tips, and some heads up about various issues going on in the Navy Yard.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, just my full name, Elissa DeSouza, and I just, I try not to always make it so negative and post things about fun things that are also going on. But, I hear feedback from that. It's like, I don't want to go out to that event. There, might be gunshots popping off at any time. So people are scared, but trying. Yeah.
Elissa DeSouza, that's with 2 S's in the first name. By the way, real fast, politicians, elected officials, they're not stupid. They want to harness, social media and sort of influencer types. Have any of the members of the district council or the mayor's office, have they reached out to you to try to partner with you, to try to work with you with your efforts to try to shine a light on what's going on here?
No, I would have loved to do that. I did reach out after I ran the election, but it didn't seem like anyone wanted to work with me. Again, if you don't think that there's crime in the area, that was my primary focus, was safety for the community. Who would want to reach out to work with me if there's no crime?
Amazing. And disappointing and not surprising. Elissa DeSouza, thank you so
Stay
much.
safe.
I appreciate all the
Stay
great
safe.
work. Thanks for being such a great
Yeah.
friend of the program.
Thank you so much.
It is 7:44.
Later this morning on the Chris Plante Show, the White House reporters want Trump to build him a comfortable new briefing room.
I don't want you to be comfortable.
9 a.m. on WMAL.
Fascinating moment yesterday with one Gavin Newsom, Governor Hairgel, you know, the DC Comics villain out there in Sacramento. He has amped up his rhetoric with regard to redistricting. You know, he's threatened to redistrict Republicans out of existence in the state of California if Texas goes ahead with their program. Of course, he's got some legal hurdles if he tries to do that, hurdles that Texas does not have. We can get into that in a moment. But, you know, facts, truth, reality, it doesn't matter when it comes to Gavin Newsom. Here he is doing his best Clint Eastwood impersonation in a selfie video meant for Donald Trump's consumption, I think. Take a listen.
Hey, President Trump, it's time to stand down. It's time to make another phone call to Greg Abbott. This time, instead of calling him and telling him you're, quote unquote, entitled to 5 congressional seats, it's time to tell him to stand down. It's time to recognize that democracy is at risk. It's time to, dare I say, do the right thing. Actually, see how that feels for you, doing the right thing. If you don't, California will neutralize anything you do in the state of Texas. California will continue to punch above its weight. We believe in democracy.
Kill
We
a
believe
punch
in
above
liberty.
its weight, please. It's
Right.
the most populous and wealthiest state in the union. What do you mean above its weight? What is this what is this delivery style of his as he
is
stops and reads his talking points
so weird
as he
and
has no idea
uncomfortable to
What?
listen to.
he's saying? He doesn't know. It's cringe. It's stupid. It's
so
ridiculous,
weird.
of course. But by the way, imagine being a California citizen right now, a citizen of that state, a resident, and thinking to yourself, you know, we've got enough problems here in California. What's our governor focused on? Oh, he's using me as a political weapon. You know, and Gavin Newsom has not asked the people of California if they want to be redistricted.
He's focusing on Texas.
That's right. And he's using the people and their representation. Like, it's not even a question as to whether what if they're perfectly happy with their congressman right now?
Right.
What if they're perfect,
Right.
regardless of whether it's a Republican? Nope. You will shut up and you will be used as a weapon, and I will use you as a weapon. But here's the problem: in California, any redistricting has to go through a major approval process with courts and various advisors overlooking it. The only way he can do what he's claiming he wants to do is through a state initiative, which he might accomplish, but it ain't going to happen the way he thinks. He's running for president, and that's what this is really all about.
That's exactly right.
Keep going, Texas. Don't look back. Don't look in the rearview mirror. You've got them on the run. They are terrified. You can smell their fear. It's 7:54.